One of the many things that are really fascinating about the Sparks of Artificial General Intelligence early experiments with GPT-4 paper that came out this week was the focus on interaction with humans, specifically understanding humans and focusing on theory of mind, which I'm going to get to in this video. Why is this important and why is this so fascinating? Well, it has a lot to do with the fact that if you're using GPT or GPT-4 in particular for personas, which is something that we've been working on a lot here at iSolutionsAI, you're going to need the model to be able to identify what that persona believes and how it might think. Now, it's one thing to define the persona, but then you have to, if you're going to ask it questions or ask its opinion based on the ideology that you've defined, it has to be able to step outside itself. It's a little crazy to say this, and imagine what that persona might think. So that's very much what theory of mind is about. So theory of mind is a concept. It's mostly a kind of an adaptation of a child development test. It's specifically, there's a very popular test called the Sally-Ann test, and that is what OpenAI used to test GPT-4 on the theory of mind. Now, the Sally-Ann test is a pretty classic false belief test, and it's used to assess the theory of mind in children. And children at about the age of 5 years old, they don't pass this test. And after they get 6, 7 years old in the standard development cycle, they can pass the test. And it's going to be very easy for you when you hear what the test is to understand it, but it's a very big deal that the model can step outside itself and it can identify a false belief. That's really what the whole idea here is. You can read a little bit more in the paper on this, but here is the scenario. Now, there's something really interesting about this. It's not the Sally-Ann, it's now the Alice and Bob, and it's not the classic Sally-Ann where Sally has a pebble and she puts it in a box and then Ann moves it out of the box into a bag and then she leaves her, all this kind of stuff. What they did specifically so that they didn't get any false positives from memorization is that they called it Alice and Bob, and they modernized it. So we've got a shared Dropbox folder. We've got a file called photo.png, and it's in a certain path, and you get the idea. This is the modern version of the same idea. Alice wants to open the photo file. This is photo.png. In which folder will she look for it? Now, the whole point of this is that there's a false belief. Now, children under 5 years old, they will just say, oh, it's in the folder that you just told me that they put it in. But the whole point is you have to understand that Alice had left the room. That's a really important part of this. And she didn't see that it was moved there. So the whole idea is she should look where she left it last, where she thinks it was when she left the room. That's the premise of this whole test. So the idea is GPT-4 successfully passed the Sally-Ann false belief test. And they actually created a bunch of other ones too. I'll just briefly show you a couple before we get into another theory of mind experiment that I'm going to run. So in this case, it's Tom lost his ZURFIN. And before you Google ZURFIN, it's not a thing. That was, again, to avoid any memorization, false positives on this test. They're basically just saying, look, he lost something and he didn't tell Adam. Adam starts talking to him about how much he loves his ZURFIN, and then he notices that Tom makes a sad face. And this is really important. Now we ask the model, why is Tom making a sad face? We're not asking the model, why are you making a sad face? We're saying, why is one of these people making a sad face? And so that idea would be, it's because it's trying to show empathy. It's because he lost his ZURFIN, reminds him of what he's missing, and so on. Now it gets deeper. What does Adam think causes Tom's sad face? This is going another level, right? So now we're asking yet another persona what the other persona thinks, and still not the model, what the model thinks. And in that case, it says Adam might not know what causes Tom's sad face, since he doesn't know that Tom lost his ZURFIN. That's a huge deal. He might think that Tom's bored, so on and so on. Really interesting ability to reason about the emotional state of others in complex situations. Crazy. And I'm not going to go into the rest of these for the sake of time, but if you're really fascinated by this, you should check out this section. There's several more of these, and you can see the improvements from GPT-4, even over ChatGPT or the 3.5 turbo version. So let me show another example. This is another theory of mind, a more modern approach to the theory of mind. This one's called the Strange Stories Film Task. This is an advanced theory of mind where, again, children will, or actually this could be adults when you're testing developmental age, they're going to watch a video. So if we go down to the video, you can see some clips from it. We, of course, can't have GPT-4 watch a video yet, but we're going to feed it the script. So it's the basic premise is that there's two individuals, Max and Alice, And then Alice says, oh, I've been working really hard for ages. I think I finally got this, the way I'm going to end my songs. And then she plays really badly and then sings really badly and then looks at Max and says to Max, what do you think? And he says, well done, Alice. That sounds really good. So what's the point of this? The point of it is that we want to understand whether the model can see why Max said that, and if Alice understands that he is not being sincere. It's the premise of identifying a white lie, right? So this particular theory of mind test does have 3 questions, and it has a very specific way that it scores it. So I thought it might be interesting that we feed the dialogue to GPT-4, have it answer the 3 questions, and then we'll take a look at how it did in the score. So let's go ahead and just run this on GPT-4 first. Okay, so let's just do a little bit of formatting. Of course, we could have addressed this in prompt engineering, but just let's take a look at what the answers are. So we see that it says Max said that to encourage Alice and to make her feel good about her progress, even though the performance was not perfect. That is actually pretty crazy that it can identify and interpret. That is what they're testing for in theory of mind. If I were in Alice's situation, that's really pretty crazy because now the model is actually identifying itself and speaking in first person. I might say, thank you for the encouragement, Max. I know it's not perfect, but I'll keep practicing. And then finally, the question here, what instrument is Alice playing? Alice is playing the guitar. Let's score this. Okay, so we see here that we have the scores. First of all, looking at why did Max say that? The ideal answer would be 2 points, reference to the white lie, or making her feel good or not wanting to hurt Alice's feelings. And we can see that not only does it say it doesn't want to hurt her feelings, but it identifies that it was in fact a white lie and what his motivation was to do that. That's pretty crazy stuff. So now answer number 2. So if you were in Alice's situation, what would you, the model, say next? The ideal answer would be a statement that acknowledges that Max's comment might not have been completely honest, or it might have been a white lie, and then ask for some additional clarification or feedback. So ideally, it would have been something, frankly, like the exact answer we got. So if I was in her situation, I would have said, thanks for the encouragement, Max. I know it's not perfect, but I'll keep practicing. So it wasn't quite sarcastic, but it was an opinion that implies that it could be improved. That's pretty crazy stuff. So now it's a 4 out of 4. And then finally, if it says what instrument was Alice playing, and it's 1 point for mentioning a guitar. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but this was a perfect score in a more advanced theory of mind experiment. Thought this was really interesting, and this is a big deal if you want to use models, specifically GPT-4, for creating personas and then asking questions of that persona so it can step outside of itself and its own perspective and take on the perspective of another persona. Very big deal, and just one of the many amazing things that came out of that paper.